Hello and welcome to the News9 Plus show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. Our top story on the News9 Plus show is the first budget of the Modi 3.0 government and the seventh budget, a record seventh budget for Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. It comes at a time when there are huge global geopolitical challenges, that is outside of India, and of course challenges within India in terms of unemployment and inflation. More importantly, this time around, it is the NDA 3.0 government, which means this government is presenting this budget with the demands of allies as well, adding to the wish list for budget 2024 that is coming in from all across the board, including the middle class, which is burdened with taxes. Would there be some tax relief in budget 2024 for the middle class? Will the focus on fiscal consolidation continue? What will be done to alleviate rural distress, boost manufacturing and investments for job creations? Specifically speaking, what can the government do to create jobs in this budget? What can we expect from Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman in budget 2024? To analyze that, joining us now are Mr. Dilip Chenoy, former Secretary General, Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We have Mr. Banuchandar Nagarajan, former consultant, the World Bank, Washington, D.C., and the policy experts. And in the studio is my colleague and friend Amit Ranjan. Amit, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us. I'm going to begin by asking you to set a context for the budget that's upon us right now. It comes at a time when, for example, GDP growth is over 8%. There is inflation seems to be coming within range. Yes, of course, it's not within range as yet, but the growth, the manufacturing sector's growth, they've all been positive green shoots, and Indian economy has remained remarkably resilient amidst challenging times for the world.
Challenging times for the world, good times for India. As you said, GDP growth is above 8%. Manufacturing is 58 on the PMI index, which is good, anything above 55. Then there is a RBI dividend of 2.11 lakh crores that has been paid to the government, that much adding so much cash for the government. And there is the JP Morgan listing, which basically will be giving more inflows in form of the debt investments to the country. So, lot of money at the hands of Nirmala Sitharaman, but as you mentioned, there are geopolitical challenges and there are coalition government challenges. And there is a challenge of inflation is in control, but food inflation isn't. Good thing over there is monsoon seems to be starting well.
Monsoon seemed to be starting well. Let me take this across to Mr. Dilip Chenoy, former Secretary General of FICCI. Dilip, as with every single budget, a full year budget, the expectations are high. It's a brand new government that has taken charge. Yes, of course, the talk is all about policy continuity because it's the same government we've had for the last decade or so. So tell us from your perspective, what would you ideally expect from budget 2024, considering the challenges it faces?
So, if you look at the whole economic survey and the challenges that they've outlined, and the conversations that have been happening between all the stakeholders in the government, I think the direction in which the government is being nudged to act are the following. The first is, I think, there is a lag of private investment. And private industry is saying that unless consumption grows, right, and unless our capacity utilization grows, we simply can't invest. So you would suspect that the government would take some measures in this budget and some outside of the budget, because GST is typically outside of this budget, but to boost consumption, right? And you mentioned that when you were introducing the show, you talked about the middle class and their taxation burden. So possibly, normally these are done in the last but one budgets, but this budget, the opening budget, given the circumstances here, if you want to grow at 8%, calls for some measures of tax relief. I think the other two areas that have been coming out in focus, and I'm not talking about the allies' demands on the budget, etc., but the two fundamentally is job creation and education and health. Now, in the context of job creation, you have to focus on the MSMEs. You have to focus on the startups. Because the whole startup ecosystem is a huge set of issues there, whether it is the angel tax, whether it's the ESOPs, whether it is the compliance measures or the way they evaluated, etc. a whole, if you want them to grow and you want them to add to the number of jobs, you got to address that. And similarly, if you want to address that, you need to address the MSME sector. In addition, if you want to look at, food inflation and, the veg thali or the non-veg thali, which is the new index which people are talking about, if you want to reduce the price of that, you have to find out how to increase capacity in the whole food sector and reduce prices there, because that has been a huge challenge in the last time. So increasing consumption, looking at the small and medium industry, looking at boosting sectors which create jobs, and
Right.
then looking at infusions in the healthcare and education sector.
Banuchandar Nagarajan, one is the political compulsions that this budget comes with, and second is the fact that it's a house where the opposition numbers are far greater than what the previous 7 budgets, odd budgets that were presented were with. So in that sense, in this context, how do you expect budget 2024 to be?
There's going to be anything different, and I don't think the previous 10 budgets that the Modi government has presented had anything that are so out of whack and extraordinary that the current coalition partners are going to point fingers at. They have presented a very solid budget, very fiscally conservative budget, even during the election season. If you look at the interim budget, they did not go for the sops. In fact, I came on your channel and said that they have to put more money in people's pockets. There was a K-shaped recovery, etc. But still, they still went for conservatism. Compare this with the 2009 interim budget, when Mr. P. Chidambaram waived off farmer loans. Okay, so just to say that this government has always been fiscally conservative. But coming to the economic survey, I really like this document because it's very stable and shorn of all the pomp that usually comes with budget and the related discussions. It lays out the pros and cons very clearly, like what the previous panelists were saying. The economy is growing very well at 8.2%. The fiscal glide path, you remember, we actually took a lot of loans to get through COVID. So they are on the fiscal glide path, and it's going to be less than 4.5% in 2026. The inflation seems to be also coming down to 4.5% by the end of this year. So this is all there. But the challenges remain. The economic survey clearly says that there has to be 78 lakh jobs that has to be created annually to cater to the workforce. It also expresses concern that the investment in plant and machinery has increased only by 35% compared to 105% for buildings. So, and also it points to areas where there can be trust and focus, which is agriculture, where the economic survey says that it has to be made fashionable and productive so that youngsters take up to agriculture. It also talks about green transition and so many other interesting ideas. But the only out of whack or really exciting idea or out of the box idea that I've seen in the report so far is that the CEA asked for increasing FDI from China to circumvent the problem of trade deficits with China. So that is something that's very exciting that I saw. Back to you.
All right. FDI inflows, macroeconomic survey pointing out to the fact that FDI inflows are going to be challenging considering the global uncertainty and the high interest rates in the country, isn't it, Amit?
Yeah. So FDIs will be a direct link to what creating jobs and manufacturing. And one thing that industry would be looking forward to in this budget is the expansion of the PLI scheme. It has worked well in electronics, it has worked well in pharmaceuticals, not so well in some other sectors, but probably textiles is one they will be looking at. EVs is coming, how would they be expanding? So FDIs will be directly linked to what they do with the PLI, and that will be linked to manufacturing and hence jobs. So it will be that linkage probably which the industry would be looking forward to in this budget.
Okay, Dilip, if I were to ask you, we were talking about the macroeconomic survey, it goes on to reiterate the fact that India's growth rate, the real GDP growth for FY25, financial year 2024-25, has been pegged at 6.5 to 7%, which is roughly in line with what the IMF has, the ADB has. So we're looking at a 7% growth rate for the upcoming financial year. From budget 2024's perspective, when it comes to boosting GDP growth and India being able to reach out for its Viksit Bharat aspirations, what do you think needs to be done?
Okay, so the 7% growth is a very positive outcome. And I think, in the last 6 budgets or the last 10 budgets of the NDA regime, I think they've been very conservative in terms of the numbers, the growth numbers, and the expansion in the revenues of the government. And therefore, they've been actually able to spend, even during COVID times, when it had all the 8 or 7 or 9 versions of the Atmanirbhar plan where they spent some money there, they were able to do it without really upsetting the whole, macroeconomic stability, and we were able to come out from that. In fact, the economic survey talks about a 20% growth, over the COVID, year. So it's a huge positive. The excess money that they have they will get, they can actually use it in multiple ways. One, as it's mentioned, that the PLI scheme and schemes to boost manufacturing. Second, I think you will see some amount of more spending for the bottom of the pyramid, not necessarily in the welfare measures, but in terms of low-cost housing, in terms of completing the electricity reach, completing the water reach. Then maybe they might actually take up something in the education or health space. You might see a tweaking of the health program to cover more beneficiaries going forward. And I think in the overall context, you must remember that this government has actually put a blueprint for 2047, right? And I believe that each budget from now till then, if this government is there or whichever government comes in, if they align to the aspiration to a developed economy by 2047, it'll be all growth oriented. But just one caveat, I think we should try and aspire for maybe an 8.5% growth rate, or a little bit higher, because the number of jobs we need to create and the job elasticity of investment, right, is declining. So we have to actually invest more to get the same number of jobs that we could do maybe 5 years before. So that's the challenge.
Banuchandar Nagarajan, that is the challenge. Also, the same goes for maintaining fiscal consolidation. And that is the balance that needs to be struck, maintaining fiscal consolidation at the same time, spending enough to create enough jobs.
Yeah, exactly. So that also, we'll find out tomorrow how the government has read the election results, politically speaking, right? So I do not know whether they will go for a more consumption-oriented budget. As we see from the results of FMCG companies, the consumption patterns have not been great, especially in rural areas. So whether are they going to focus on that, give more sops for consumption, or are they going to still stick to what they have done before, which is focus on investments, capital expenditure, and so on. So that is something that we will have to wait and see. But definitely there is going to be a thrust on jobs, and like what the previous speaker was saying, there's going to be a thrust on manufacturing as well. I would be really focused on what they do with agriculture, because it is going to be a government funded program. And I do not know whether they're going to take the federal structure or the federal route to do more farm reform, so that there's more private capital coming into agriculture, providing more jobs, and increasing agri-business and agri-infrastructure and so on.
Right, I was just going to come to that. Amit, the agriculture and rural sector distress is again an ongoing trend, just like food inflation.
Ever since 2020, the contribution of agriculture into GDP has been going down. From 20, it has come down to 18. So agri-economy, rejuvenating it, making it self-sufficient, is going to be one challenge that the government will have to take up. And that rural demand, because 60% of India is in the rural areas, rural demand has been stagnating. So that is something, how the government does it. Alternate energy, which has been the buzzword of this government for some time now, that is a rural thrust area that they could push for. All will come into light tomorrow, but that is one area they will have to definitely look forward, focus on.
Dilip, isn't it, apart from creating enough jobs and also helping the middle class by reducing their tax burden, alleviating agri distress and rural sector distress is a major issue for the upcoming budget?
Yeah, absolutely. And the economic survey actually talks about this. And they have, while they have talked about it in the category of climate resilient agriculture, but they are talking about, looking at aligning the various practices, like farming practices, depending on their agroclimatic climate, etc., as well as water security, or whether it's investing in technology, or you're looking at marketing infrastructure. And there's a whole thrust on e-NAM and e-procurement. It's very interesting, Ashok Gulati and his team came out with a program which was saying is, can you look at an incentive which could be shared between the union and the states to move people away from the crops like paddy and wheat into more other things like oil seeds, etc. And they talked about 12,500 rupee kind of a incentive from both sides to actually do this. And remember, the current agriculture minister has done hugely transformed the agricultural sector in Madhya Pradesh. So even if he can apply some of that, I know it's difficult to apply what you do in a state to the national thing, but I think he's got the wherewithal to get collaboration between the union and the states to make this transition happen. You will see definitely a lot of movement in the agriculture sector because we have to make this sector more productive. Otherwise, the GDP won't grow. We have to ensure, you mentioned earlier that we make it exciting and get the youth to be there and make it a mainstay of the Indian economy going forward.
Right. The other question I have to ask Banuchandar is that Banuchandar, we're talking about rural productivity and agricultural produce. There is a linkage between that and food inflation. And food inflation is something that everybody has been concerned about. And from the surface of it all, it's very difficult to create policy at budget level or at the RBI level to be able to tame food inflation, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. If you look at the final consumer price of various food items that we consume, 25% is lost due to wastage at the retail level, which means at transportation from the warehouse to the retail and retail to the final consumer. So this is a phenomenal wastage, and this mostly happens because of lack of poor infrastructure in terms of storage, transportation, and so on. So I think the government has been fixing it. I think the number of warehouses that have been built in large scale across the country has been increasing, but nevertheless more needs to be done. But I'm actually, the more exciting part of this whole conversation is in the creation of agri-businesses, where we enter the area between agriculture and manufacturing, and these jobs could be created in situ, like in the villages or in small towns, instead of young people migrating to big cities. So that is where the most exciting work or exciting prospect is. And in fact, the CEA has remarked about it in two places. One, which I said before, he wants to make agri-business more fashionable. And second thing, he points to the missing middle in the MSMEs. There are a small number of very large enterprises, and there are a lot of tiny enterprises in the bottom and a missing middle. So he proposes deregulation. He proposes incentivization of MSMEs to move up the value chain. So I think it is all linked to one another. And since majority of India is employed in MSMEs and agriculture, I think we have to kickstart that process, and I'm very hopeful that the budget will do that from tomorrow.
All right, we will leave it at that. Completely out of time on this. I want to thank Dilip Chenoy, former Secretary General of the Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and of course Mr. Banuchandar Nagarajan, former consultant, the World Bank and policy expert. Thank you both of you for joining us here on the News9 Plus show, and of course my friend and colleague Amit Ranjan here in this area. Thank you, Amit. India's net direct tax collections grew at 17.7% in the financial year 2023-24 to hit over 19.5 lakh crore rupees. The share of personal income taxes rose to over 53% from just over 50% in the previous year. Corporate taxes contribution dipped to about 46.5% from 49.5%. Individual taxpayers are contributing more and more to the exchequer every single year. Would this budget reduce the burden on the taxpayers? Would this budget offer incentives to wage earners to reverse the trend? Watch. Will FM axe the tax? Only on the News9 Plus app.